Aliyah Fatima had always believed that life's hardships were simply pieces of a larger test designed by Allah. Growing up in a cramped neighborhood of Karachi, she learned early that strength was not something you inherited. It was something you built. Her home was small, worn down, and filled with responsibilities far too heavy for her young shoulders. Yet she carried them with grace. Her father had passed away when she was still a child, leaving her mother, a quiet, hard-working seamstress, to raise her and her younger siblings alone. Aliyah, at 22, was the family's backbone. She balanced part-time work, studies, and household duties, all while wearing her hijab with the same pride that she carried her faith. Her dream was simple but enormous: to lift her family out of poverty and give her younger brother and sister the education she never had the privilege to pursue. One afternoon, while editing product photos at a small online design studio, she received an unexpected email. The sender claimed to be a representative of a Danish modeling agency looking specifically for modest Muslim faces for a new global campaign. Her breath caught in her chest. The email detailed everything: paid flights, accommodation, a halal-friendly environment, hijab-compliant shoots, and excellent pay. Everything looked legitimate: professionally formatted documents, social media profiles, websites, and references. For a moment, Aliyah imagined handing her mom the first big paycheck. She imagined fixing the roof that leaked every winter, buying medicine without calculating the cost twice, and sending her sister to a proper school. But when she showed the message to her mom, the older woman's face tightened with worry. "Aliyah, the world is dangerous. I don't like this. Please be careful," she pleaded. Aliyah held her mother's trembling hands. "Mom, I understand. But what if this is my chance? What if this is the door Allah opened for us?" Her mom sighed deeply, conflicted between fear and hope. "If you truly believe this is right, then at least pray for protection, and promise me you will stay alert." "I promise," Aliyah whispered. Over the next several days, she attended online interviews with a woman named Anna Berg, who appeared kind, confident, and professional. Anna praised Aliyah's modest look, her calm expressions, her international potential. Paperwork followed: contracts, release forms, travel details, all appearing perfectly normal. Soon, Aliyah's flight ticket to Copenhagen arrived. On the morning of her departure, her mom embraced her tightly. "My heart feels uneasy, Aliyah. Just promise me you'll come back home safe." Aliyah blinked back tears. "I'll come back, Mom. Insha'Allah." At the airport, she recited verses under her breath, grounding herself in faith. The flight was long but peaceful. Yet the moment she landed, a strange tension filled the air. A stern man holding a placard with her name approached her without a smile. "Welcome to Copenhagen. Follow me," he said. Something inside her whispered danger, but she couldn't turn back now. The test had begun. The cold air of Copenhagen hit Aliyah like a wall, sharp and unfamiliar. She tightened her coat around herself and clutched her small handbag, scanning the airport for someone who resembled the friendly coordinator she had seen on video calls. Instead, the man who greeted her looked nothing like what she expected. No smile, no warmth, no welcome sign of professionalism. His expression was stiff, unreadable, almost irritated by her presence. "You're Aliyah Fatima," he stated, not asked. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "Follow me. The agency car is waiting." His English was fluent, but his tone was dry, mechanical. Aliyah tried to ask where Anna Berg was. The woman who had interviewed her, reassured her, and promised to guide her throughout the entire trip. But he dismissed the question with a curt wave of his hand. "Schedule's changed. She will meet you later. Hurry." A knot formed in Aliyah's stomach. Still, she reminded herself that new countries often felt overwhelming. Maybe she was overthinking. Maybe this was just European bluntness. She whispered quietly under her breath, "Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakil," and walked beside him. But instead of being led toward the bright glass exits of the airport, the man guided her through a dim hallway, then down a service elevator, and finally to a side door leading into a nearly empty parking structure. A black van waited with its engine running. Her heart thudded. This doesn't look like an agency transport, she said gently. The man didn't answer. He opened the sliding door of the van, revealing two other girls sitting inside, both from different countries, both terrified. Their eyes widened when they saw Aaliyah, as if silently pleading for help she couldn't yet give. The man motioned her inside. "Your luggage will be transported later. Get in." Aaliyah hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her that something was wrong. Denmark was supposed to be safe. European countries were supposed to protect women, not frighten them. Why did this feel like she was being taken somewhere she didn't choose? "Where exactly are we going?" she asked, her voice steady but firm. "To the accommodation arranged for you," he replied, expression unchanged. "Where is the agency office?" "You'll go there tomorrow." His refusal to provide clear answers felt like ice crawling under her skin. Still, refusing him here, Althea foreign, without her luggage, felt riskier. She stepped into the van. The door slid shut behind her, sealing in a thick silence. The van drove for nearly 40 minutes, passing through increasingly deserted streets. With each mile, the buildings grew older, the neighborhoods quieter, the signs of city life fading. Aaliyah felt her heart pounding against her ribs. One of the girls finally whispered, her voice shaking. "They took our passports." Aaliyah's breath caught. "What? Why?" "They said it's for safety, but we haven't seen them since." "Did you meet Anna?" The girl shook her head. "We only met this man. No one else." Aaliyah felt her world tilt. Something was deeply, dangerously wrong. When the van finally stopped, they weren't outside a studio or a hotel. They were in front of a fenced compound with boarded windows and thick metal doors, more like a detention facility than accommodation. The man stepped out first. "Get inside, quickly." Fear prickled under Aaliyah's skin. She whispered a quiet, "Ya Allah." This was not a dream opportunity. It was the beginning of a nightmare she had never imagined. The moment Aaliyah stepped out of the van, an icy dread wrapped itself around her spine. The compound stood tall and bleak, its exterior stripped of color, as if hope had never touched its walls. The windows were reinforced with metal bars, the doors thick and rusted, and the courtyard eerily quiet. This was not a modeling residence, not a training center, not anything she had been promised. Her breath trembled as the man leading them tapped a code on a keypad. The heavy door buzzed open. Aaliyah exchanged a glance with the two girls beside her. One seemed barely 19, the other maybe 23, but both shared the same expression: silent terror. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant mixed with something else, something metallic, like fear itself had seeped into the walls. A tall woman with sharp blue eyes and a stiff white collar walked toward them. She resembled a nun, though not the kind that evoked peace. Her expression was cold, rigid, purposeful. "So," she said, studying their faces. "The new group." Aaliyah's pulse stumbled. "Where is the modeling agency?" she asked carefully. The woman smirked, not kindly. "There is no agency, child. You've been brought here for a different purpose." Another woman, equally stern, stepped forward holding a clipboard. "Name?" she demanded, pointing to Aaliyah. "Aaliyah Fatima." "Muslim?" Aaliyah hesitated only for a second. "Yes." The woman scribbled something harshly. "Then you will need correction." Aaliyah's spine stiffened. "Correction?" Before she could ask more, the women ushered them through a corridor lined with small rooms, each door bolted from the outside. A few doors had numbers scratched into them, and faint crying echoed from somewhere deeper inside. They entered a long hall with metal benches. Aaliyah was ordered to sit. The two stern women stood at the front like instructors. The first woman spoke again, this time in perfect English, her voice sharp and practiced. "You girls have been brought to Denmark for reformation. Many of you come from Muslim backgrounds. That will be addressed. You will learn obedience. You will learn discipline. Most importantly," she lifted a Bible from the table, "you will learn the truth." Aliyah felt heat rising in her chest. "This isn't what we were told," she said. "We were promised jobs." The woman stepped forward until her icy face hovered inches from Aliyah's. "Jobs?" she repeated mockingly. "No, dear. You were selected. You fit profiles. And you—" Her gaze hardened. "You're a Muslim with a strong face. We have plans for you." Aliyah's fingers tightened around her hijab. "I will not abandon my faith." The woman chuckled softly, the sound void of mercy. "You will, unless you enjoy suffering. And if you resist too much—" She motioned toward a side door. Two large, muscular African men stood behind a grated window, staring blankly. "We hand girls over to them. They break the stubborn ones." A chill tore through Aliyah's chest. Fear thrashed inside her, but she refused to lower her gaze. "My faith is not for sale," she whispered. The room fell silent. The woman's smile faded. "Then you will learn the hard way." She snapped her fingers. "Take them!" Two guards appeared, each grabbing one of the girls beside Aliyah. They screamed, begging, struggling. Aliyah stood frozen, her heart pounding like thunder. One guard reached for her arm. She whispered a trembling, "Ya Allah, protect me." But protection, she feared, felt very far away. Aliyah had imagined fear before. Fear of poverty, fear of illness, fear of losing her mother. But she had never imagined this, fear designed, structured, and executed by people who treated cruelty like a profession. The guards dragged her down a narrow hallway lit by flickering bulbs that cast long, twitching shadows on the walls. She felt her heartbeat pounding so violently she wondered if the guards could hear it. They pushed her into a cramped room with a single metal chair bolted to the floor. A camera lens blinked in one corner. The woman in the white collar, the one who had spoken earlier, entered behind her, carrying a Bible and a thin wooden rod. "Sit," she ordered. Aliyah sat, her fingers gripping her hijab so tightly her knuckles turned white. The woman placed the Bible on the table and folded her arms. "This is the book you will learn. This is the truth you will accept." "I won't abandon Islam," Aliyah said, her voice trembling but steady. The woman's eyes narrowed. "That phrase is the beginning of your suffering, Aliyah." She lifted the wooden rod and slammed it against the metal table. The sharp crack echoed through the room, making Aliyah flinch despite herself. "You came from a corrupted faith, a backward ideology," the woman continued. "We are here to purify you." "My faith is from Allah," Aliyah whispered. "I won't leave it." The woman leaned in close, her breath cold. "You will. Every girl does eventually. Those who don't are handed over to our partners. Some call them the Habshi men. They educate through physical persuasion." Aliyah's stomach dropped. She felt bile rise in her throat. The woman straightened. "Lesson 1. Deny Islam." "No." The woman's face hardened. She signaled to the guard watching from the door. He stepped inside and struck Aliyah across the cheek. Pain exploded across her face. She gasped but refused to cry. The woman repeated coldly, "Lesson 1. Deny Islam." Aliyah pressed her hand to her burning cheek. "I will never deny Allah." Another blow. Her ears rang, her jaw throbbed. "This can continue all day," the woman hissed. "Deny Islam." Aliyah closed her eyes, whispering inwardly, "My Lord is with me. My Lord is watching. My Lord will not abandon me." The woman's patience snapped. She motioned for the guard to bring a device, a small box with wires. Aliyah's breath hitched when she realized what it was, a shock unit. "No, please, then deny Islam." Aliyah's lips shook, but her answer was the same. "Never." The shock tore through her nerves like fire. Her body jerked violently, a scream ripping from her throat. She collapsed forward, panting, dizzy from the pain. "Again!" the woman ordered coldly. The guard pressed the button a second time. Aliyah cried out, her vision blurring with tears, not of surrender, but of agony. Still, when the woman repeated the demand, "Deny Islam," Aliyah forced out a hoarse whisper, "Allah is my protector." The woman slammed the Bible on the table. "Then you will be broken, piece by piece," she snarled. "By the end of this week, you will beg us to take you away from Islam." Aliyah trembled in the chair, her body aching, her spirit wounded but not extinguished. Under her breath, barely audible, she whispered, "Ya Allah, give me strength. I am alone, but you are with me." The woman heard the whisper and smirked. "We'll see how long your God stands with you." But Aliyah clung to her faith with whatever remained inside her, because if she let go, she knew she wouldn't survive what was coming next. The next morning arrived without sunlight. In the compound, time did not flow the way it did in the outside world. There were no windows, no clocks, no sense of day or night. Only the endless echo of footsteps, muffled cries, and the cold flicker of fluorescent bulbs. Aliyah had barely slept. Her cheek throbbed, her muscles burned from the electric shocks, and her mind felt bruised. Yet somewhere deep inside, a tiny flame of faith still flickered. A guard entered her cell without warning. "You, up! The pastor wants to see you." Her heart dropped. Pastor? They dragged her to a larger room, a chapel-like hall with wooden benches, dim lights, and a massive cross mounted on the front wall. The air smelled of incense, but beneath it lingered something rotten. The scent of fear soaked into the walls. Standing at the front was a tall man in his early 50s, dressed in a black clerical coat. His expression carried a smile that didn't touch his eyes. Beside him lay a Bible, a metal baton, and a folder thick with documents. "Welcome, Aliyah," he said, as if greeting a guest instead of a prisoner. "I am Pastor Gregor. I will oversee your transformation." Aliyah swallowed hard. "There is no transformation. I am Muslim. I will stay Muslim." He chuckled softly. "We have handled thousands like you. You say this today, but tomorrow you will recite from the Bible." He stepped closer and studied her face with unsettling interest. "You have a purity that is valuable. Strong Muslim identity. That is exactly why we need you." Aliyah frowned. "Need me for what?" He tapped the folder. "You will be a public face. Proof that Islam is collapsing. Proof that Muslims willingly embrace Christianity. A symbol." His smile widened. "You will appear on screens, posters, interviews. A hijabi who became a Christian star." Aliyah felt nausea rise. "I will never betray my faith." Pastor Gregor's smile faded. He closed the folder and signaled to the guards. "Bring them." Moments later, two enormous African men entered. They stood like statues, expressionless, cold, void of humanity. One cracked his knuckles slowly, deliberately. "These men," the pastor said calmly, "belong to a group we collaborate with. When girls refuse the Bible, we let the Habshi men handle them." His eyes hardened. "They do not show mercy." Aliyah felt panic seize her lungs. She backed away instinctively until her shoulders hit the wall. Gregor raised a hand toward the men. "If she refuses again, take her." "No!" Aliyah cried involuntarily, trembling. The pastor approached her quietly, lowering his voice to a chilling softness. "You have two options. Read the Bible aloud, or be handed over to them, your choice." Aliyah's breath shook. She felt trapped, suffocating. The men watched her with blank hunger, waiting for a signal. She closed her eyes. "Ya Allah, I am terrified, but I will not betray you. Protect me, even if I stand alone." She exhaled slowly and said, "I will not leave Islam. Do whatever you want." Pastor Gregor's jaw tightened. His smile vanished completely. "So be it." He nodded to the guards. "Prepare her. If she won't accept the truth, we'll break her until she begs for it." The two Habshi men stepped forward. Aliyah braced herself, whispering the words that were now her only armor. "La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. She didn't know whether strength or terror filled her voice, but she kept repeating it. Because if she stopped, she feared she would shatter completely. The guards dragged Aaliyah out of the chapel hall and into a dim corridor, where the flickering lights created shifting patterns on the walls, patterns that felt like warnings written by the shadows themselves. Her legs trembled, but not from exhaustion alone. It was the crushing fear of what Pastor Gregor had threatened. The Habshi men followed behind her like silent storms, their heavy footsteps echoing ominously through the cold passageways. Aaliyah was taken to a larger chamber, one she had never seen before. The walls were padded, the floor concrete, and the air thick with the scent of dampness and hopelessness. A single metal ring was bolted into the ground, with chains lying coiled beside it like a sleeping serpent. One of the guards pushed her forward. "Kneel." Aaliyah refused. He shoved her again, harder. "Kneel!" Her knees hit the ground, the cold surface numbing her bones. Tears gathered in her eyes, not from pain, but from the overwhelming humiliation pressing down on her chest. She wrapped her arms around herself instinctively, gripping the fabric of her hijab as if it were a lifeline. The door opened again, and the pastor entered. Pastor Gregor's footsteps echoed deliberately, calculated to increase fear before he even spoke. He stopped just inches away from Aaliyah, his voice icy. "You still have time to reconsider. Read the Bible. Say you renounce Islam, and all this ends." Aaliyah lifted her trembling gaze. "I will die as a Muslim." His face darkened. "Then tonight will be the beginning of your destruction." He snapped his fingers. The two Habshi men stepped forward. One cracked his neck slowly, the other uncoiled the chain like an executioner preparing his tools. Aaliyah felt her heartbeat hammering painfully, fear clawing at her throat. Her mind screamed at her to run, scream, beg, anything. But her soul whispered another command: "Call upon your Lord." With a voice that trembled yet carried the weight of absolute desperation, she whispered the first words that came to her heart. "Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar." The pastor scoffed. "Your God cannot hear you here." But she continued, louder this time, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah." The first Habshi man reached for her arm, and in that exact instant, the room shook. A deep, thunderous vibration rolled through the floor like a living force. The chains rattled violently. The overhead lights flickered rapidly, then burst with a sharp crack, showering the room in sparks. The men stepped back in shock, confusion washing over their faces. Pastor Gregor stumbled, grabbing the wall for support. What is happening? This is impossible." Aaliyah's hijab fluttered from a sudden rush of air, though no windows were open. Something unseen, something powerful, moved through the room like an invisible shield surrounding her. The men tried again to approach her. They extended their arms, their hands jerked back as if burned. Pastor Gregor's eyes widened in pure horror. It's repel force. This is not normal," he shouted. Aaliyah remained on her knees, trembling, crying, whispering the name of Allah over and over. Each word seemed to make the shaking stronger. "Ya Allah, protect me. Ya Allah, you are my only guardian." The two Habshi men backed away. The pastor screamed, "Stop that! Someone restrain her!" No one could. The trembling abruptly stopped, but the fear in the room did not. Everyone stared at Aaliyah as if she were surrounded by flames no one else could see. Pastor Gregor's voice cracked. "Take her back to isolation, now." But even as they dragged her away, the guards didn't dare lay full hands on her. Touching her felt like touching fire. Aaliyah, exhausted and shaking, realized one truth. Allah had not abandoned her, not for a second. They dragged Aaliyah back through the twisting corridors with far more caution than before. The guards who once shoved her now kept their distance, glancing at her as if she carried an unseen fire. The pastor walked several steps behind, shaken, his composure cracked like a fractured mask. He muttered to himself, words Aaliyah couldn't understand, but she sensed fear in every syllable. They threw her into a small isolation cell, barely large enough for her to lie down. The door slammed shut, locking her into total darkness. No bed, no blanket, no water, no food, just silence. Her body ached from the shocks, her knees still raw from the cold concrete. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, thirst burned in her throat. She curled up in the corner, shivering. Pastor Gregor's voice echoed from outside hours later, cold and triumphant. "Leave her. No food, no water. She will break." After that, the hallway fell silent again. Aliyah pressed her forehead against the wall and breathed shakily. "Ya Allah, I am weak. I am so weak. Please, don't let me lose myself." Tears slid down her cheeks, warm against her cold skin. She whispered surahs she still remembered from childhood. Surah al-Ikhlas, al-Falaq, an-Nas, reciting them like threads that kept her tied to sanity. Hours passed, or days. She couldn't tell. Time dissolved in the darkness. Her lips cracked, her throat burned, her stomach cramped. She felt faint spells coming and going, the world tilting, spinning. But even then, she refused to say the words they wanted. She refused to reject her faith. At some point, she didn't know if it was night or day, Aliyah heard footsteps outside. Heavy, purposeful, the same two Habshi men. Her heart froze. "No, please, Ya Allah," she whispered. But instead of opening the door, they muttered quietly among themselves. Their deep voices carried fear. She recognized the tone even if she didn't understand the words. One of them repeated something in Danish she had heard earlier from the guards. "The Muslim girl, she is protected." Protected. Then silence again. Aliyah's exhaustion finally became too heavy. She lay down on the cold floor, feeling the last of her strength slipping away. Her breaths grew shallow, her eyes fluttered. "Ya Allah, don't let me die here." And then, a faint glow appeared on the far wall. Aliyah blinked, unsure if it was a hallucination from starvation. The light was soft, bluish, like moonlight filtered through water. It spread gently, warming the cold shadows. It wasn't coming from a bulb, none worked here. It wasn't passing under the door, the hallway was pitch black. It was simply there. The light drifted slowly across the wall until it illuminated a small patch of concrete near the floor, as if pointing, as if guiding. Aliyah forced herself up, crawling toward it. Her fingers scraped the surface, rough, uneven, slightly softer than the rest of the wall. She gasped. The cement here was new, freshly sealed, weak. Her heart pounded with new hope. She dug her fingers into the wall despite the pain. The cement began to crumble. She clawed harder, faster, her nails splitting, her hands bleeding. Behind the thin layer of cement, a vent, a small grate, a way out. "Ya Allah, you heard me," she whispered, sobbing. The glow brightened, not blinding, but comforting, like reassurance, like a sign. She worked until her arms shook violently, but she didn't stop. Finally, the opening was just wide enough for her thin, starved body to slip through. She took one last trembling breath, whispering, "Bismillah," and crawled into the darkness, toward freedom. The metal edges of the vent scraped Aliyah's skin as she pulled herself through, inch by painful inch. Her body was weak, starved, dehydrated, trembling, but fear pushed her forward and faith carried her where strength could not. The ventilation shaft was narrow, cold, and dark, but it was freedom compared to the cell she had left behind. Each movement sent sharp pain through her ribs, yet she continued whispering under her breath, "Ya Allah, guide me, protect me, don't let them catch me." For the first few minutes, she heard only her own breathing echo inside the metal tunnel. Then, echoes of footsteps. Fast, searching, shouting. The compound had discovered her cell empty. Aliyah froze, pressing herself against the cold steel, barely daring to breathe. A flashlight beam danced across the grates behind her, illuminating dust motes that glimmered like tiny stars. "She couldn't have gone far," a guard shouted. "Pastor wants her alive," another added. Alive, not safe, Not unharmed, just alive enough to torture again. Aaliyah swallowed her fear and crawled faster. The ventilation tunnel twisted and turned, sometimes dropping lower, sometimes rising. Twice she nearly lost consciousness. At one point, she collapsed onto her elbows, dizzy, whispering, "Ya Allah, I can't." But then she remembered her mother's voice, gentle yet firm. "Aaliyah, Allah never leaves his servants alone. Even in the darkest place, his light will find you." And so she continued. After what felt like an eternity, she reached a rusted grate leading into a storage corridor. With all the strength she had left, she pushed. The metal gave way with a screech that echoed far too loudly, but she didn't care. She dropped to the floor, landing hard on her wrists. Pain shot up her arms, but she forced herself up and stumbled forward. The corridor was dimly lit by emergency lights, most of which flickered, as if power had been unstable since the strange quake in the torture room. Every few feet, Aaliyah paused to listen. Once, she heard guards sprinting nearby. Another time, she heard a woman weeping behind a locked door. But Aaliyah kept moving. She had no choice. Finally, she reached a heavy door with a red exit sign above it. Her heart pounded wildly. She pushed the bar, the door didn't budge. She pushed again. Nothing. Locked. A sob escaped her lips. "No. Please. Ya Allah. Please." Then, as if answering her prayer, the lock clicked. The door swung open. Cold night air rushed in, stinging her skin, filling her lungs with a kind of hope she had forgotten. Aaliyah stumbled out into the darkness. The compound behind her looked abandoned from the outside. No signs, no lights, nothing to hint at the horrors within. She began to walk, barefoot on freezing asphalt, her breath forming small clouds in the air. Each step was agony, but she kept moving. She didn't know which direction led to safety, not until headlights flashed across her eyes. A car approached slowly. Aaliyah's fear spiked. Were they guards? Was Pastor Gregor inside? She tried to run, but her legs buckled. She collapsed on the roadside. The car stopped. A man stepped out, middle-aged, wearing a jacket with the logo of a local cleaning company. His eyes widened when he recognized her battered state. "Oh my God, girl, are you okay? You look like you escaped hell." Aaliyah could barely whisper. "Help, please. I need help." He lifted her gently. "Get in. I don't know what happened to you, but I'm taking you to the police now." She trembled uncontrollably. They'll come for me." The man shook his head. "Not tonight. Not while I'm here." As he drove toward the nearest police station, Aaliyah looked out at the quiet Danish night sky. For the first time since arriving in this country, she breathed freely. She whispered, "Alhamdulillah, you heard me, Allah, you never left me." Her escape had begun as desperation, but her rescue, that was something else entirely, something divine. The man who rescued Aaliyah, his name was Jonas Mikkelsen, drove with both urgency and caution, constantly checking his mirrors as if expecting someone to follow. Aaliyah sat in the passenger seat, wrapped in his spare jacket, shivering uncontrollably. Her lips were cracked, her fingers bruised, but her eyes remained fierce with the fire of survival. "Who did this to you?" Jonas finally asked, voice soft, afraid the wrong tone might break her fragile state. Aaliyah swallowed painfully. "A Christian pastor. He tried to force me to leave Islam." Jonas's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "In Denmark? This is madness." Aaliyah's voice trembled. "He said, if I don't renounce Islam, he will let the Habshi men harm me." Jonas inhaled sharply, horrified. "You're safe now. I promise you, no one will touch you again." When they reached a small-town police station, Jonas carried her inside. The officers on duty froze when they saw her condition, malnourished, bruised, with claw marks on her hands and wrists. A female officer rushed forward. "My God, child, what happened to you?" Aaliyah whispered, "I was trafficked and tortured. Because I refuse to leave my religion. They took her immediately into a private room, offering water, blankets, and medical attention. A Danish translator arrived. A doctor examined her, shocked at the signs of electric shocks, starvation, and physical restraint on her body. Aliyah, the officer said gently, you are officially under state protection now. No one will take you back. Still trembling, she told them everything. How she was deceived into coming for a modeling contract, how she arrived in Denmark instead of Dubai, how the pastor and his cult-like group tried to force her to convert, how they threatened violence by using the Habshi men as tools of terror. Some parts of her story seemed unbelievable, like the room shaking when she cried out Allah's name, but the police listened silently, taking notes. When Aliyah described the underground facility, the cameras, the locked rooms, and the forced Bible recitations, the officers exchanged grim glances. Trafficking, forced conversion, torture, coercion. It was far bigger than a single pastor. Detective Ingrid Rasmussen, a stern but compassionate woman, stepped into the room. Aliyah, she said, kneeling beside her, what you escaped from is part of a larger investigation. We've had missing girl cases in the same region. Your testimony may be the breakthrough we needed. Aliyah's eyes widened. You mean other girls? Yes, Ingrid said. Girls from Africa, Eastern Europe, even other Muslim countries. You're not the first they tried to purify, but you're the first to escape alive. Meanwhile, inside the hidden compound, panic erupted. Pastor Gregor stormed through the corridors, his rage barely hiding his fear. How did she escape? He shouted, slamming his hand on a table. The guards trembled. Sir, the cameras glitched. The lock malfunctioned. The back door opened on its own. Gregor's face turned pale. Opened? By itself? Yes, sir. The men refuse to go near her cell now. They say, the Muslim girl is protected. He slammed his fist again, this time softer, shaken. He remembered the tremor in the room, the light that flashed when she said Allah's name, the invisible force that repelled his men. This cannot be happening, he whispered. If she reaches the police, Barife, everything is finished. But by the time he sent his men to search the roads, Aliyah was already in state custody, already protected, already telling the truth, and the first warrants for arrests were being prepared. The next morning, Denmark awoke to headlines that shook the country. Muslim girl escapes illegal conversion facility, police raid underway. Christian pastor accused of human trafficking and forced conversion. Aliyah watched from a hospital bed, her hand wrapped in bandages, her lips still bruised. Detective Ingrid stood nearby, updating her on the situation. We raided the compound at dawn, she said. It was abandoned. They fled overnight. But we found enough evidence, documents, recordings, clothing, chains, drugs, to arrest anyone connected to it. Aliyah's heart sank. So, Pastor Gregor got away? Ingrid shook her head. Not for long. We've issued an international warrant. His photos are everywhere. And the Habshi men? 2 have been caught trying to cross into Germany. Aliyah closed her eyes, whispering softly, Alhamdulillah. The doctor entered the room with a soft smile. You're healing faster than expected. Your body is severely dehydrated, but your vitals are stabilizing. Aliyah nodded quietly. She still had nightmares, flashes of the dark chapel, the threats, the chains. But each time she woke trembling, she reminded herself, I survived. Allah never left me. Hours later, 2 women from an immigrant support organization came to speak with her, social workers trained to help victims of trafficking and abuse. They explained her legal rights, her options for asylum, and her chances of staying in Denmark permanently under protected status. You are strong, one of them said, squeezing her hand gently. Girls who escape this kind of operation, they rarely make it alive. Whatever protected you, whatever gave you the strength, it saved you for a purpose. That night, Aliyah lay awake staring at the quiet ceiling. For the first time since arriving in this cold country, she felt the warmth of safety. Her mind drifted back to that moment in the torture chamber, the moment the ground shook, The lights burst, and something unseen surrounded her. Was it an angel? A miracle? A test? A sign? She didn't know, but she felt no need to explain it. It was enough that Allah had answered her cry. Meanwhile, Pastor Gregor was found hiding in a rural farmhouse 2 days later. When the police surrounded him, he did not fight. He looked exhausted, terrified, muttering incoherently. She said his name, and the walls shook. We couldn't touch her. She's protected. Protected. His arrest made international news. The truth spread, and Aaliyah's testimony became the center of one of the largest trafficking investigations in Denmark's history. Months later, Aaliyah stood outside a community center wearing a soft beige hijab and a simple dress. She had regained weight, color had returned to her cheeks, and her eyes, once filled with fear, now shone with purpose. She had joined a support network for vulnerable Muslim girls, helping new immigrants, speaking at awareness events, and sharing her story to prevent others from falling into the same traps. Her voice was gentle but unshakable. I am not a victim, she said before a gathering of students. I am a witness. I survived because Allah never left me, even when everyone else did. The room fell silent. Her message touched hearts, Muslim and non-Muslim alike. After the event, Detective Ingrid approached with a smile. Aaliyah, you've become a symbol of strength in this country. You have no idea how many lives you've already changed. Aaliyah smiled softly. Everything I lost, Allah returned something better. She looked up at the sky, calm, clear, endless. She came to Denmark expecting modeling and glamour. They tried to take her faith, her dignity, her identity, but she left with something far greater, unbreakable faith and a new purpose. Aaliyah whispered under her breath, Alhamdulillah, I survived, and I will rise again. The girl they tried to break became the woman who exposed them. The girl they tried to silence became the voice that brought justice. And the girl they threatened with darkness became a lantern of light for others.